defense. And what we continue to believe is, well, a couple of things. One, the war was completely unnecessary, a war of choice. Mr. Putin still had diplomatic options on the table when he decided to invade. He can end this war today by being a negotiator of good faith with the Ukrainians. It could end today. There's no indication that he's willing to do that. But we still believe that it should end now, and Mr. Putin should commit to good faith negotiations with the Ukrainians to do that. Mike Brest, Washington Examiner.
Thanks for taking thanks for taking my question. This is going to be a little bit out of left field, but is the Ahmadi family still in Afghanistan? And if so, why is this taking so long? We haven't heard anything about it in a little while.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for that. We're still working very closely with the family's representatives, with Mr. Ahmadi's former employer, to effect their safe relocation out of Afghanistan. They are still there, but we are working this very, very hard. It's a complex process. We want to make sure that that we do this in the appropriate way. And I don't have more of an update than that for you. Nothing heard. Mike?
Yeah, John, can you comment on the high mortality rate of Russian generals in this campaign? As you know, the U.S. sustained one general officer loss after 20 years in Afghanistan. But I mean, if Ukraine is correct, there have been 5 Russian generals killed in a month.
Yeah, we can't verify those numbers, Mike. I mean, we've seen them. I know the Ukrainians have reported the number. I think the Russians.
Do you think it says anything about the Russia's military or about this, just sort of the unique nature of this campaign, assuming they've lost?
I mean, again, you'd have to assume that they've lost all those generals, and we're not in a position to independently verify that. The Russian military is not organized the way we are. You know, they don't really have a non-commissioned officer corps. And they have been struggling. So it's not out of the realm of the possible that more generals are more in the field. But I just can't verify I can't verify the numbers of how many they're losing. Look, take a step back. They have struggled, again, what we talked about with logistics and sustainment. They have struggled with maneuver. They did not expect a stiff Ukrainian resistance. They are not integrating, we don't see them integrating air and ground forces the way you would think a modern military might do that. They appear to be operating in silos. We think they're having command and control problems, ability just to communicate with one another and communicate between units. So there's been a lot that they haven't done successfully here. And again, all of that can end today if Mr. Putin agrees to negotiate in good faith and end the war. Fadi.
Thank you, John.
I'll come over here in a second.
2 questions. One is follow-up on Louis' question. So in light of the assessment by the Secretary that the security situation in Europe has changed, is the U.S. in favor of permanent and collective reposturing on the eastern flank of NATO, something to be taken by the entire NATO alliance? And the second one, as you recall, the previous aid package of $350 million actually was delivered in probably in a record time. We had a...
It was.
Yeah. I was wondering why, although this is more than double that, the 800 is more than double that package. Can you explain why you're still looking into how to source it? Are there like issues related to shortages? I mean, what's the reason?
I mean, look, yes, you're right. We delivered that $350 million in record time, and we're going to be moving out just as expeditiously on this $800 million. I mean, it just got announced by the president a few days ago, and there's a lot in it. I would also remind, Fadi, that there are shipments arriving literally as we speak every day. We're still completing that $350 million. I think we'll finally get to the end of it by the end of this week. We're working on this very, very hard. I mean, just think about it. In 1 year alone, the Biden administration committed $650 million originally. Then we added 350, then another 200, and then another 800. So that all told, in the time that President Biden has been in office, we have now committed $2 billion worth of security assistance to Ukraine. And a large part of that initial chunk of $650 million was delivered before, well before there was even a threat of invasion. This is something we've been focused on, and I think you're going to see that continued focus going on forward. Now, we understand that now, time is not necessarily our friend. We get that, which is why that $350 million was delivered so quickly, and it's why we're going to work very, very fast on this one. On the posture question, I think, Fadi, it's just too soon to know right now.
Your position on the issue, the U.S. position, not...
That's what I mean. It's too soon to know right now. I think the Secretary certainly understands that, again, the security situation in Europe is changed. And however this ends up, we're going to have to look at the European continent in a different way. And the Secretary understands that. What does that mean exactly in terms of force posture? We don't know yet. But I think the Secretary is willing to have that conversation with his leaders, civilian and military alike, and certainly wants to be able to provide options to the President should the President decide to go in new ways. But we're just not there yet. Right now, the focus is appropriately on two things: making sure Ukraine can continue to defend itself by getting this stuff there as fast as possible, and two, making sure that NATO is prepared to defend NATO territory, and that we are prepared to do our part in Article 5 commitments. That's where the focus is right now. Now, what the long term is going to be, we'll have to see. Jim?
Going back to Mike's question, all of those problems with the Russian military, there are also reports that Russian soldiers are suffering frostbite. Well, if there's any military in the world that you think would know how to operate in the cold, you'd think it was the Russian one, which seems to indicate an absolute breakdown in leadership. And all of those problems that you mentioned before, is this affecting the morale of the troops out there? Are you able to assess that? And could that be something that changes the tide in this?
Well, I think all of you know, you guys have been covering the building long enough, you know how important morale is to military effectiveness and cohesion. Look, I would just tell you, we certainly have indications that morale is a growing problem inside the Russian forces that are fighting in Ukraine. And as time goes on and they continue to fail to achieve the progress on the ground that they want to achieve, we've seen increasing indications that morale and unit cohesion is a problem. And yes, that absolutely translates into potential military effectiveness issues. I don't want to get into too much diagnostics here on a day-to-day basis of how they're doing. I think I went through a whole litany of things we know that they have struggled with. Clearly, morale at the unit level, anecdotally, we have indications that, yeah, that's a problem.
And just another sort of, I'm sorry, Tom, but just another aspect of this, the precision-guided munitions, I guess, are running out. Is the Russian industrial base capable of replacing those?
I don't know, Jim. I mean, as I said before, I mean, 27 days in, they've used a lot of munitions. They are, and I didn't really get to this earlier, but what we have seen as they have been frustrated on the ground, they have resorted to more and more long-range fires, as we call it here, bombardment by artillery, missiles, rockets, and clearly that's going to have that's going to show up in an inventory decrement. But we don't have an exact idea necessarily of what that looks like for them. Again, I think it's important to remind how much combat power, combined arms capability they built up over the fall, and that they still have so much of that available to them. But even for all that, it's quite stunning. Even for all that power, that 27 days in, they really haven't achieved any of the strategic objectives we think they were after. Tom?
Thanks, John. Actually, follow up to two of our colleagues here. One, in Fadi's question about the $800 million, is it safe to presume that like the 350 million, you're not going to wait until the entire 800 million is ready to go?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. And the second one, the Jim's about morale. There have been reports, and I know you can't always confirm all reports you hear, but there have been reports regarding Russian troop morale that some of the Russian soldiers are now slashing themselves, et cetera, causing physical harm to themselves in order to get sent home. What can the Pentagon confirm or elucidate on this?
I've never been accused of being able to elucidate on anything, but I can't. I can't confirm those reports. I mean, again, we have anecdotal evidence that they are having morale and leadership issues at the unit level, but I have not heard that particular report. Let me go back to the phone. Jeff Selden, VOA.
John, thanks very much for doing this. Two questions. Yesterday, President Biden confirmed Russia did, in fact, launch a hypersonic missile and described it as a consequential weapon. Can you share any additional information or assessment of what the Russians launched, or how many times, how many types of hypersonic weapons the Russians have used so far in Ukraine? And then also, I know U.S. officials said there haven't been any signs yet of Russian recruited foreign fighters showing up in any number in Ukraine. Is there any sense, though, of whether there are any Russian citizens, Russian residents who have been motivated by the propaganda Russia has been putting out to go and join the fighting, perhaps traveling to the DNR or LNR to join up with militias there?
I haven't seen any indications of Russian citizens volunteering spontaneously to go fight in Ukraine. But that's sure as heck happening in Ukraine by Ukrainians. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday. Average citizens taking up arms, and sometimes even resisting without taking up arms. It's quite extraordinary, but I've seen no indications that that's happening on the other side. Quite the contrary, you see these this big fancy rally in an athletic stadium, which is clearly an orchestrated event by Mr. Putin, and the shutdown inside Russia of any semblance of independent media or independent information available to the Russian people. So clearly they aren't getting fully informed about what their military is doing inside Ukraine. And as for the hypersonics, the president's correct. I mean, we do understand that that at least in one instance they used a hypersonic missile. Interesting that you would choose that against a fixed building when you look at the range of hypersonic missiles at a relatively close range. It's hard to know what exactly the justification was for that, but it could very well be tied to inventory problems and performance problems that they're having with respect to precision-guided munitions. So we'll just have to see where that goes. As you've heard the Secretary say, and he said it just again on Sunday, we don't view the use of that type of weapon as some sort of game changer here. They took out a storage facility with it, or at least reportedly took out a storage facility with it. That's a pretty significant sledgehammer to take to a target like that. So it's not exactly clear what their intentions were. Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. I have a couple of questions on Horn of Africa counter-terror operations. Last week, Army General Stephen Townsend, he spoke before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and he raised a couple of concerns regarding counter-terror operations. The first was the so-called security challenges and risk as a result of former Trump pulling out the majority of about 700 U.S. troops from Somalia, and he said it's hindering the ability to battle al-Shabaab. Then he also had concerns about the so-called over-the-horizon approach to counter operations coming from Djibouti into Somalia, sort of like commuting back and forth. And he also said that was sort of hindering counter operations, that maybe it would be better to have a mixture of boots on the ground. So what does the Secretary think about these concerns? And are there going to be troops, is he considering troops being deployed back to Somalia? And what's his position on the effectiveness of the over-the-horizon approach? Thank you.
Again, there's an awful lot there. I'm not going to get ahead of decisions the Secretary has or has not made or advice that he's going to give to the Commander-in-Chief with respect to our force posture in Africa. Clearly, General Townsend was, honestly speaking, about a continued threat from terrorist groups in Africa. And we're mindful of that. And we're going to continue to work with General Townsend and our partners on the continent to adjust posture as necessary. I don't have anything to speak to today, no announcements to make, but it's not a threat that we're taking lightly or that we're going to ignore. Again, I don't want to get ahead of it. You could look at the global posture review and see how we laid out some of the concerns in Africa, and again, we'll see where this goes. Yeah. Is that Orrin?
Yeah. Is there an effort to try to get a snapshot of civilian casualties at some point now that we're reaching the 1 month mark, or an assessment on what that number could be? And in a related question, what specifically is DOD doing to assist in the evaluation of possible war crimes?
So on your first question, I mean, there's no effort here by the Department of Defense to tally civilian casualties. I mean, there's other international organizations that are taking a look at this. Orrin, and you've seen the estimates as well as we have. We're just not in a position to independently be able to verify those. We're not on the ground. And as you well know, I mean, civilian casualties, even when it's an operation when we are on the ground, is often a difficult thing to nail down specifically. So we're not going to take that mission on here to try to give a tally. Clearly, there are civilian casualties, and clearly they're mounting every day because of the indiscriminate attacks that the Russians are conducting, because of what we see as intentional now, as they've become more frustrated and relied more on long-range fires, intentional targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure, residential homes, residential areas, hospitals, schools, that kind of thing. And as I said yesterday, we believe there is evidence of war crimes by the Russian armed forces. And we, across the administration, not just the Department of Defense, the administration is going to continue to gather evidence to provide to numerous investigative bodies as they look at this. But it's also, while we do that and while that's important, it's also for the whole world to see. We don't need to tell CNN about this. I mean, you're on the ground as well. You've seen that. It's pretty stunning coverage. I mean, it's laid bare for everybody. I won't get ahead, and it wouldn't be appropriate for us at the department to get ahead of investigative processes that we don't own. It's just we believe we should call it like we see it, and we believe that there are war crimes being conducted by the Russian armed forces. Heather from USNI.
Thank you so much. I wanted to see if you could confirm any reports that Russia launched 8 caliber cruise missiles from Admiral Grigorovich frigates in the Black Sea earlier today or yesterday.
Heather, I can't. I'm not able to confirm that particular bit of reporting. What I can tell you is we have seen in the last 48 hours or so, we have seen increased naval activity in the northern Black Sea. We have indications that in the Sea of Azov off Mariupol, that the Russian naval vessels have contributed to the bombardment of Mariupol from the sea, but it's difficult for us to quantify that, and we can't get to the level of detail about what munitions were used. But clearly, in the last couple of days, there has been increased Russian naval activity in the Black Sea. Okay, take one more. Yes, sir.
John, what should the American public know about this new space defense partnership with Australia?
You're going to have to let me take that question. I'll take one more.
Cyber warfare. Well, you
okay, go ahead.
Okay, you've eloquently talked about the long-range brutal fire the Russians are firing on the Ukrainians, but the cyber warfare aspect of this, is Ukraine's civilian infrastructure still up and running in terms of internet capability and command and control for the military? I mean, this vaunted cyber warfare capability hasn't seemed to play out with the Russians.
There are times and places when internet access in Ukraine is being disrupted, but there's also times and places when it's not, or where it's being restored. And we talked about this a little bit before. The Ukrainians have built up over recent years their own cyber resilience, and we've helped them do that. And it's not just the United States; other allies and partners have helped them do that, and they have managed to maintain a sense of that resilience. It's not perfect. The Russians clearly have tried to act in cyberspace to disrupt Ukrainian abilities to command and control and to communicate. But largely at a strategic level, they failed to do that because the Ukrainians still have good command and control over their forces in the field in ways that the Russians actually don't have. Okay, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. We are out of town starting tomorrow, so we'll pick up the briefings on Monday of next week. Thanks.